Hello everybody, hope you're doing well and thanks for joining us for another video. Last week I published this video in response to some claims that were being made about NS-31, Blue Origin's recent New Shepard all-female flight apparently being faked. Now, the main claim that I'd seen being made was based around the fact that somebody inside the capsule opened the door from the inside before they were quickly made to close it again, and then a few minutes later, Jeff Bezos opened it from the outside, but to open it from the outside, he needed a handle. That apparently was a sign of it being faked. So I showed how inside the capsule they actually have a release handle fitted to the door, just like aeroplanes do, and that it is standard procedure on New Shepard flights for one of the ground team to open the door. Quite possibly this is because they have to wait until the capsule has been inspected and properly secured. However, there were also some other claims that I tackled. One about the apparent flimsiness of the hatch, and the other about why the capsule looked so clean and without scorch marks that you typically see on a craft returning from space. Now, I tried to address both of those in my last video, however, that video has been getting a lot of comments. Many raising more claims about the same topics, as well as new claims being made about other topics related to the flight. However, they all appear to be either misconceptions about how it works or based around misinformation. So, in this video, I'm hoping to try and set the record straight. Now, with regards to the hatch design, I highlighted in the previous video that not only is the hatch actually pretty thick, but that it opens inwards so that when the craft is at high altitude, the pressure inside the capsule is higher than outside, so it is naturally pushing on the inside of the door, keeping it pressed shut. Now, quite a lot of people took that and brought up Apollo 1 and questioned why has New Shepard got a hatch that opens inwards when after the Apollo 1 incident, the Apollo Command Module hatch was changed to open outwards. Well, the problems of Apollo 1 weren't just that the hatch opened inwards. It also had a very complex locking mechanism that took the best part of a minute to fully open. The hatch also had two layers to it. The inner hatch portion opened inwards, but the outer portion opened outwards. When the fire broke out in the capsule, it spread really quickly, which caused the pressure to rise very fast. That prevented the crew from getting the hatch open before the pressure got too high. However, the reason that the pressure rose so quickly and to levels beyond which then the hatch could be opened was that A, the cabin was already pressurized to 16 psi, so it was already 1 psi above ambient pressure, and B, that 16 psi was 100% pure oxygen, not the 21% oxygen that we typically breathe. And if you're wondering about the implications of Apollo astronauts being in a pure oxygen environment, then I recommend you check out this video that I've previously made. But suffice to say that that environment of Apollo 1 made the materials within the craft highly flammable and also allowed the fire to spread very quickly, which caused the sudden increase in pressure. New Shepard, by comparison, uses regular air, so any fire would spread much more slowly, and they also have a built-in fire suppression system that can be activated by the people on board.
I am in seat number 6. This is one of the emergency seats. It's like the emergency exit on an airplane. We are responsible for the fire suppression system. So if we were to see the fire indicator here, I would be responsible for pressing this button.
And to be clear, an inwards opening hatch on a spacecraft is not a major problem. In fact, it's pretty common. Apollo changed the command module design to open outwards, however the lunar module on Apollo maintained an inward opening hatch. The Soyuz hatches open inwards, the airlocks on the ISS all open inwards, even commercial aircraft doors pull inwards before swinging out. Like I said, having a hatch which opens towards the higher pressure means that that pressure is then naturally trying to keep the door shut rather than fighting to push it open. It's why the outer hatches of submarines open outwards, because when the submarine is submerged, there is a much higher pressure outside that forces the hatch closed. Now, while I mention aircraft doors, a couple of people did try bringing up comparisons between those versus the New Shepard hatch, given how thick plane doors are compared to New Shepard. However, plane hulls are actually heavily insulated. The hull is two relatively thin layers with some structural support beams running through them, and then a lot of insulation material inside. This helps regulate the temperature as well as reduce noise within the cabin. And the doors are made in the same manner, so their overall thickness isn't so much for structural necessity, but rather for comfort. The actual outer hull skin of a plane is a matter of millimeters thick, and yet that is able to withstand the pressure differences of flight just fine. And speaking of pressure, there were quite a few comments about the capsule being pressurized, and that if that were the case, then the hatch wouldn't be able to be opened. Now, this seems to be people misunderstanding what they mean by the capsule being pressurized. It seems they're under the impression that the capsule was held at a pressure higher than ground level, i.e., that after the hatch was closed before launch, the pressure in the capsule was then increased and maintained at that increased level. Now, if that were the case, then the door would be very difficult / impossible to open after landing. So, capsules are sealed so that they can maintain a breathable air pressure whilst they ascend. Aeroplane cabins are pressurized, hence how humans who typically can't breathe unaided above 10,000 feet can cruise in a plane at 40,000 feet and have no problems breathing. Yes, the capsules are pressurized in order to stop the occupants from suffocating, but the pressure within the capsule was not higher than sea level, meaning it would not stop the hatch from being opened after it landed. Next, the question of scorch marks. As I covered in the previous video, people were drawing comparisons of this New Shepard capsule looking very clean versus SpaceX Dragon capsules after landing looking very charred and burnt because of re-entry. Now, I highlighted in that video that Dragon capsules are returning from an orbital speed of over 17,000 miles an hour, whereas New Shepard flights literally fly straight up to a stop and then free fall back down. So they're traveling much slower. If you watch the telemetry during the flight, the capsule during descent doesn't accelerate all the way down to Earth. It accelerates initially, but then as it's getting into thicker and thicker air, the drag increases, which prevents it from speeding up further. Now, of course, people could say, well, those are figures from Blue Origin, so how can you trust them? But this is a characteristic that's very common with high-altitude drops, where an object will reach their terminal velocity long before they hit the ground. And with a high enough drop, they even then start slowing down before as well. Just look at the speed graphs from Felix Baumgartner's Edge of Space jump. He was free-falling for almost 4 minutes. He reached terminal velocity about 50 seconds into the jump and then began slowing down again long before his chutes opened. And his suit wasn't charred either. However, I've since had people trying to draw comparisons of this NS-31 flight capsule to other New Shepard flights and saying that previous capsule landings did show charring and burn marks. A couple of people even specifically highlighting the 5-minute 30-second mark of my original video, which they say shows a New Shepard capsule after landing with burn marks on it from re-entry. Except those are not actually burn marks. Currently, Blue Origin have 2 human-rated New Shepard capsules. RSS Kármán line, which was the capsule that was used on this NS-31 flight, and RSS First Step. First Step is the capsule which has been used for all of the previous manned New Shepard flights. NS-31 was the first time that Kármán line has flown with people on board. It's only flown once before on NS-27, but that was an unmanned flight. Now, if you look at the footage of NS-27 landing, you can see the capsule looks perfectly clean and white, just as it did on NS-31. And also, note the feather emblem under the hatch. This is the Blue Origin logo. Now, if we look at the RSS first step, there are photos of it after it's landed with the streaks across it. And at a glance, you could take them for charring. However, if we look at photos of the same capsule at launch, you can see them same streaks are already present on the capsule. That's because the Blue Origin feather logo was actually painted right up the side of the rocket. You can see in previous launches the feather design runs all the way up the booster and finishes halfway up the capsule. And the markings look the same before the launch as they do afterwards, so there's no additional marks appearing due to any charring. Then there's also a lot of comments regarding the actual landing itself. More specifically, how hard the touchdown of the capsule appeared, with huge plumes of dust coming out as though the capsule has slammed into the ground. And then people saying that the women who were coming out of the capsule did not look like they just suffered a particularly rough landing, and that the capsule again looked very clean. However, this one is actually a pretty clever feature of the New Shepard capsule. Now, Dragon capsules, when they land on water, just like Apollo used to, and that water allows for a soft break to the landing. Whereas New Shepard obviously lands on solid ground, similar to how the Russian Soyuz capsules land. And if you watch the Soyuz landings, you will see that just before the capsule touches the ground, there's a bright flash of light. This flash is caused by rockets on the bottom of the Soyuz capsule, which automatically fire downwards right before the capsule reaches the ground, in order to quickly reduce the capsule's speed to make the landing softer for the occupants. Now, New Shepard obviously doesn't fire any rockets before it lands because there's no bright flashes, but it does actually employ a similar braking system, but using a blast of air instead. Around the bottom of the capsule is a series of holes, which is connected to a system of compressed air. Just before the capsule touches the ground, these systems activate and fire jets of air straight at the ground. This creates a kickback force that slows the capsule down, as well as creating a small cushion of air directly underneath the capsule to soften the touchdown. It's actually this blast of air that is kicking up the dust rather than the capsule itself hitting the ground. And if you watch through the Blue Origin streams, for example on the NS-31 stream, the commentators actually make reference to this system and warn everybody that it will seem like a hard landing before they touch down, even though it's actually not.
We'll see a puff of smoke when it touches down, a puff of dust.
That should be
That's normal.
A puff of dust, last milliseconds, air cushion that will kick up the dust. It's a very soft landing despite the sporty perception. There it is.
And they've said the same thing about previous flights as well.
Right, so we call that the Terminal Deceleration System, the TDS system, and it essentially pushes pressurized gas towards the desert. It's like a hockey puck, if you've ever played air hockey at an arcade. It sort of just floats over the desert as it's kicking up that West Texas dust.
That's right. So if you're watching for the first time, I always like to note that dust we want to see. It is a dusty desert that we have, so that retro thrust system is again what's going to push up that dust.
So it does create the impression of a rough landing without it actually being rough for the occupants on board. And finally, there have been claims that the capsule that we see landing is apparently clearly different to the one that we see the women walk out of, due to its size seemingly changing. The most notable claim of this that I've seen was a video made by Flat Out Truth.
One of the last things I wanted to show you guys of this hoax is the Blue Origin capsule itself. Okay, now watch to your right. He's going to come running around the capsule and trips and falls right here. Okay, now what I really want you to pay attention to is the size of the capsule compared to the people standing around it and compared to him. Look at the size of that capsule right there. Now look at the size of the capsule when he's doing the rescue. Look how little bitty that thing is. Now, if you don't comprehend what I'm trying to show you here when I say two different sizes, look at the size of the capsule compared to the people standing on the ground beside it. Not even half of their bodies are as high as even half of the window. Now, Look at this shot right here. This lady is standing flat-footed on the ground and comes up almost to the top of the window of the capsule. Now, you see the difference? Big capsule, small people. Small capsule, big people.
Now, rather ironically, for a channel called Flat Out Truth that is trying to claim that the Blue Origin flight was faked and trying to deceive people, there does seem to be a big attempt here for him to deceive his audience. For starters, he's drawing a comparison of an aerial view looking down towards the capsule compared to a low camera shot that looks up towards the capsule. And that change in perspective is going to alter how big things seem when they are in front or behind of other objects. Which you could argue is him just overlooking this factor of perspective. But for me, the bigger red flag of him trying to mislead his viewers is he shows a video where the ground staff first arrive at the capsule, but the single frame of footage that he stopped on and chose to use as a comparison was when Jeff Bezos had fallen into a ditch and the other two people were crouched down or bent over. To use that frame where everyone's much smaller than they typically would be, to then draw a comparison against a view where people are standing up normally next to the capsule, seems like blatant confirmation bias and an attempt to deceive people. In reality, if we do a fairer comparison, i.e. two aerial views, one from when they first get to the capsule versus one when the occupants are exiting, you can see that this woman who's dressed in black appears roughly half the height of the capsule in both instances. Now, it's probably not an exact like-for-like comparison because the drone that has taken this footage was changing altitude a lot, but it is certainly a much closer comparison than what Flat Out Truth decided to do. In reality, you can see in the original footage, just after the capsule lands, the drone closes in to get a better view, and you can not only see the women in the capsule whilst the dust is still settling down around them, but you can see them moving and waving their hands. Which, incidentally, also dispels the claim that was made that they used mannequins in the capsule for the flight, which is a claim that actually had to use a photo from a test flight that took place 7 years ago and had to be cropped to cut out the clearly different landscape. And this, to me, speaks volumes. When you've got memes like this that are having to intentionally use the wrong images and manipulate them to fit their narrative, or to selectively pick frames of a video for a biased comparison to try and create an argument that doesn't really exist, should tell you just how baseless this idea was that the whole thing was faked. But the fact of the matter is, NS-31 is the first time a New Shepard flight has been so publicly called out as fake, but this was the 31st New Shepard flight, and it was the 11th manned New Shepard flight. All of the other previous flights looked exactly the same as NS-31, and yet for some reason, this is the first time that it's been publicly called out as fake by so many people. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for this video. As always, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video and you haven't already done so, then please consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons, and then hopefully we'll see you in the next video.